And it is recording. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Peace and Consciousness Impact Platform with GIFEW. My name is Qatar, and I am here today to interview a dear friend of mine, Leslie Avant Brown, about the legacy of Miss Rosa Parks. Leslie, welcome with us today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to have you here and have you contribute to this conversation. Our audience here knows that it's been about a week that we've had the anniversary of Miss Park, and I really wanted to have you contribute a little bit to what is it like to actually cross this threshold of the anniversary for you in the US. A lot of our audience is international, and I'm really excited to have you contribute and bring your sense and your experience to this conversation. For those of us who don't know Leslie, Leslie is the founder and CEO of Blooming Willow, and she provides healing-centered coaching and training. And Leslie, I would love to invite you to step in and introduce a little bit more about your work and who you are.
Sure. As Qatar said, I'm Leslie Avant Brown. I live in the United States in the Bay Area, and I am a healing-centered coach. I identify as a Black woman, for me meaning a mix of lots of cultures and nationalities all wrapped within one. My family is originally from the Midwest of Detroit, and many of my family members migrated from the Deep South. So this anniversary of Rosa Parks is something very near and dear to those folks that I love and to myself. I also am married to a beautiful wife. We've been together now for the last 11 years. And I am an aunt, a sister, and a lover of many people.
Wow. Thank you, Leslie. It's so beautiful to hear your introduction, and you and I interact in the space of leadership that works, and I know a lot about the work that you do, and I'm personally a big fan of it, and grateful for the healing work that you do and provide people with. I know it's very impactful.
Yes. I do have the privilege to work with numerous what folks would describe as vulnerable communities, or communities that have traditionally not been privy to coaching as a methodology. So lots of folks that live with a lot of pain and haven't had access to folks that really support them to unearth their dreams and really to step into their power. So it's a privilege.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. And my understanding is that there are also historical layers to that pain that you mentioned, and that some communities by default carry more pain from that history.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many layers, unfortunately, of oppression at work. In a lot of the communities where I work. And so there is that compounded trauma that we often talk about in the work that exists on multiple levels. And so I do think that's one of the beautiful things that moments like these really represent, is a reconnection to the power in what many folks might see as hopeless times.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the word that you used, what might seem like hopeless times. And to me, hearing that, I also hear there is hope despite the perception of hopelessness.
Yeah. I think that's the case. Even in thinking about what you all are talking about with Rosa Parks, right? When there was the Montgomery bus boycotts happening and lots of pushes to really look at the civil rights and voting rights injustice that was happening at the time, there was that same feeling of hopelessness. And I think the United States is at a very interesting point with our current administration, again, painting many communities invisible. And I think that same drive for change and hope is still there.
Yeah, absolutely. I also realized that it is also somewhat something that's coming up in the collective, in the sense that we see in the world. There seems to be this old mechanisms of disruption that are coming up to divide communities, to divide people. And as you know, our platform is all about peace and consciousness. And I would love to hear anything that you have to say around how can we bring more peace and consciousness to these conversations, to these situations of division. And also if you can share with us maybe something from the communities that you work with, some situations that you've seen that bring hope, anything that you'd like to share around that.
Yeah. I think, you know, we are at that place where we are needing to rediscover the way that we navigate this terrain. I think what's missing is that we currently live in a microwave society where everything is fast, everything is immediate, and folks are really isolated. And I think that's the big missing piece. And the piece that I'm finding is really supporting community movement and action is the coming together. It's actually the returning to the ancient wisdom of slowing down and connecting with one another. I think we miss each other. And we miss the power of the community and the collective. I think about some of my work that's happening here in East Oakland. I'm working with a group of men who were formerly incarcerated, many of them sentenced to life sentences for things that they did during their youth. And what has happened is there's so much happening in the community right now with the young people. What the government and the administrators are beginning to understand is that those people that have been locked away for years and years are very much needed back in those communities. So many people are returning and they are standing in their rightful places as the leaders that have been missing. And I think what I've seen with my work in community and my work in healing is really supporting that reconnection, that guilt, that shame, that fear that's present. How do we really address those things to allow people to really get more connected?
Yeah. Wow, that's a powerful example. Thank you. And I also hear a lot of hope in that even people who we thought may not have a second chance are actually getting a chance and rising to it. And with the proper tools are really able to turn things around.
Yeah, I think, you know, it really is kind of going back to this idea that no one's left behind, right? That we are indeed connected and responsible for one another. And I think the more that we grow in our awareness of that need and that desire, the closer we get to figuring this thing out. Or at least navigate differently through it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And actually one of the tools that we've used and we've introduced to our audience here at GIFEW is listening. And it's also a tool that you and I use in our work regularly as a way to bridge really gaps of knowledge, gaps of understanding, and even gaps of connection. I would love to hear from your perspective at this moment in history and time. How can we use more listening to really become present to each other? And especially where there is division. How can we really rely on listening and maybe other tools that you may want to share to really create more unity?
Yeah. I think it really is. In coaching, we talk about engaged listening, right, as really our ideal form of listening, where we're listening with our entire being, right? And I think that this next sort of level of consciousness requires, you know, what we talk about as transformational listening. We have to begin to listen for what's coming, for what people really want and who they're becoming. I think in addition to the listening, what I would love to see us do is even more of what you and I are doing is creating conscious relationships that support that deeper connection to the whole. Right? Even if you don't share the same values or ideologies, how are we still developing relationships that allow us to connect? We don't want everyone is the same kind of world. At least I don't. right? And so what is that invitation to connection, but also to difference?
Yeah, absolutely. I really resonate with that. And for me, there's a lot to be said about holding each other with dignity, even through our differences, and especially through our differences.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think we're just all longing to be understood. We're all longing to really feel loved and to be a part of something powerful.
Absolutely.
While it sounds simple, the way that we sort of just throw it out there, I think getting to that place is what's currently difficult.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And what can you tell us from the communities that you work with about how we can put this in context with this anniversary of Miss Rosa Parks and the legacy that she's left behind?
Yeah. So I think a lot of folks think about Rosa Parks as really being the movement, right? Because she's often placed as the face of the movement. And I know for many people, they see that action of her sitting on the bus as the truly sort of movement making point. But I think the thing that I really want to call our attention to is that what that was a long-term strategy with an intentional, a very, very intentional focus, which was what is going to support the movement to move forward? And how are we putting the leaders that we need in the places that are going to allow us to get visibility and also support us to really raise voice and awareness? Yeah, and so I think that's the invitation, right? Like, who are the leaders, right? As we're moving to this leaderful society, we're all the leaders. So what does it look like now? Yeah.
Wow, thank you for putting that in context for us. And again, I resonate, like, who are the leaders? At GIFEW, we do like to say, this is something I love to say, we are the heroes we've been waiting for.
Yes.
There is nobody else to wait for. This is it. It's us.
Yeah. That piece is taken from one of my favorite poems by a Hopi elder that really talks about the time for the lone wolf is over.
Yeah, it's time for us to come together and to rise together.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, thank you, Leslie. This has been really insightful for me, and I've really enjoyed hearing about a little bit more of the background that you have and the work that you do, especially in the communities that you do it. It's not something that gets talked about enough, in my opinion, that I don't hear about enough. So really, thank you for being with us today. Anything else that you would like to share before we close with our community?
No, I mean, I really appreciate the invitation and this move for a more connected sisterhood in the world. Right? And so, it's been an honor. And I look forward to really hearing even how this piece influences people's thoughts and ideas as they move forward.
Yeah, I would love to give you some feedback once we post it and we get some feedback. And you'll probably also join in into the Facebook group to see like the conversation if there's something that unfolds there. And so if people also want to get a hold of you, I guess they can go and look up Blooming Willow. Is that right?
Yeah, Blooming Willow. That's my coaching firm where I support a lot of my work to launch into the world.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Thank you, Qatar.
Bye.